Good morning, boys and girls. Today is Saturday, March 21st, and this is officially our first day of spring break. But I'm here to read chapter 2 from Little House in the Big Woods. And I'm going to show you the pictures before I get started. This chapter is called Winter Days. And in chapter 1, we read about how they got ready for winter, and now winter is here. The first snow came and the bitter cold. Every morning, Pa took his gun and his traps and was gone all day in the big woods, setting the small traps for muskrats and minks along the creeks, the middle-sized traps for foxes and wolves in the woods, and he set out the big bear trap, hoping to get a fat bear before they all went into their dens for the winter. One morning he came back, took the horses and sled, and hurried away again. He had shot a bear. Laura and Mary jumped up and down, clapping their hands. They were so glad. Mary shouted, "I want the drumstick! I want the drumstick!" Mary did not know how big a bear's drumstick is. When Pa came back, he had both a bear and a pig in the wagon. He had been going through the woods with a big bear trap in his hands and the gun on his shoulder when he walked around a big pine tree covered with snow, and the bear was behind the tree. The bear had just killed the pig and was picking it up to eat it. Pa said the bear was standing on its hind legs, holding the pig in its paws, just as though they were hands. Pa shot the bear, and there was no way of knowing where the pig came from nor whose pig it was. So I just brought both home. The bacon, Pa said. There was plenty of fresh meat to last for a long time. The days and nights were so cold, and the pork in the box and the bear meat hanging in the little shed outside the back door were solidly frozen, and they did not thaw. When Ma wanted fresh meat for dinner, Pa took the axe and cut off a chunk of frozen bear meat or pork. But the sausage balls, or the salt pork, or the smoked ham and venison Ma could get for herself from the shed or the attic. The snow kept coming till it drifted and bunked around the house. In the mornings, the window panes were covered with frost, and beautiful pictures of trees and flowers and fairies. Ma said that Jack Frost came in the night and made the pictures while everyone was asleep. Laura thought that Jack Frost was a little man, all snowy and white, wearing a glittery white pointed cap and soft white knee boots made from deerskin. His coat was white and his mittens were white, and he did not carry a gun on his back, but in his hand he had a shining sharp tools with which he carved the pictures. Laura and Mary were allowed to take Ma's thimble and make pretty patterns of circles in the frost in the glass. But they never spoiled the pictures that Jack Frost made at night. When they put their mouths close to the pane and blew their breath on it, the white frost melted and ran in drops down the glass. Then they could see the drifts of snow outdoors and the great trees standing bare and black, making thin blue shadows on the white snow. Laura and Mary helped Ma with her work. Every morning there were dishes to wipe. Mary wiped the dishes, and Laura more than Laura because she was bigger, and Laura always wiped carefully her own little cup and plate. By the time the dishes were all wiped and set out, the trundle bed was aired. Then, standing on one side, Laura and Mary straightened their covers, tucked them in well in the front of the sides, plumped the pillows, and put them on their place. Then Ma pushed the trundle bed into its place under the big bed. After this was done, Ma began to work that belonged on that day. Each day had its own proper work. Ma used to say, wash on Monday, iron on Tuesday, mend on Wednesday, churn on Thursday, clean on Friday, bake on Saturday, rest on Sunday. Laura liked the churning and the baking days best of all. In the winter, the cream was not yellow as it was in the summer. The butter churned from it was white and not as pretty. Ma liked everything on her table to be pretty, so in the wintertime, she colored the butter. After she put the cream in the tall crock, churn and set it near the stove to warm, she washed and scraped the long orange curved carrot, and then she grated it into the bottom of the old leaky tin pan that Pa had punched full of nail holes for Ma. Ma rubbed the carrot across the roughness, and it went through the holes, and then she lifted up the pan. There was a soft, juicy mound of grated carrot. So here's a picture of the girls making their bed. Hopefully all of you made your beds this morning. And here's a picture of Laura churning the butter. Sounds like a lot of hard work. Laura and Mary were allowed to eat the carrot after the milk had been squeezed out. Mary thought she ought to have a larger share because she was older. Laura said that she should have it because she was littler, but Ma said they should divide it equally. They each got half. When the cream was ready, Ma scalded the long wooden churn dish, put it in the churn, and dropped the wooden churn cover over it. The churn cover had little round holes in the middle, and Ma moved the dash up and down, up and down. She churned for a long time. Mary could sometimes churn while Ma rested, but the dash was too heavy for Laura. At first, the splashes of cream showed thick and smooth around the little hole. After a long time, it began to get grainy. Then Ma churned more slowly, and the dash began to appear tiny grains of yellow butter. When Ma took off the churn cover, there was the butter in the golden lump, drowning in buttermilk. When Ma took out the lump with the wooden paddle into the wooden bowl, she washed it many times in cold water, turning it over and over and working it with the paddle until the water ran clear. After that, she salted it. Now came the best part of the churning. Ma molded the butter. On the loose bottom of the wooden butter mold were carved little pictures of strawberries. With the paddle, Ma packed butter tightly into the mold until it was full. Then she turned it upside down over the plate and pushed the handle of the loose bottom. The little firm pat of golden butter came out with the strawberry and its leaves molded on top. Laura and Mary watched breathlessly, one on each side of Ma, while the golden little butter pats, each with a strawberry on top, dropped onto the plate, and Ma put all the butter through the mold. Then Ma gave them each a drink of the good, fresh buttermilk. On Saturdays, when Ma made the bread, they each had a little piece of dough to make their own little loaf. They might like a bit of cookie dough, too, to make little cookies, and once Laura even made a pie in her little patty pan. After a day's work was done, Ma sometimes cut paper dolls for them. They cut the dolls out of stiff white paper, and they drew faces with a pencil. Then, from tiny bits of colored paper, she cut dresses and hats and ribbons and laces so that Laura and Mary could dress their dolls beautifully. But the best time of all was at night when Pa came home. He would come in from trapping through the snowy woods and the tiny icicles hanging off of his mustache. He would hang his gun on the wall over the door and throw his fur cap and coat and mittens and call, "Where are my little half pints and sweet cider half drunk up?" And that was Laura because she was so small. Laura and Mary would run and climb onto his knees and sit there while he warmed himself in front of the fire. Then he would put on his coat and cap and mittens again and go out and do the chores and bring in plenty of wood for the fire. Sometimes when Pa had walked his trap lines quickly because the traps were empty or when he had got some game sooner than usual, he would come home early, and then it would be playtime. One game they loved to play was called Mad Dog. Pa would run his fingers through his hair, make his brown hair stand up, and then he dropped on all fours growling, and he chased Laura and Mary. So here the girls are, and here's Pa acting like he's a mad dog. They were quick at dodging and running, but once he caught them against the wood box behind the stove, they couldn't get past Pa, and there was no way out. Then Pa growled so terribly, his hair was so wild and his eyes were so fierce, and it all seemed real. Mary was so frightened that she could not move, but Pa came nearer. Laura screamed, and with a wild leap, scrambled she went over the woodbox, dragging Mary with her. And at once there was no Mad Dog at all. There was only Pa standing there with his blue eyes shining, looking at Laura. "Well," he said to her, "you're only a little half pint of cider all drunk up, but by jinks, you're as strong as a little French horse. You shouldn't frighten the children so, Charles," Ma said. "Look how big their eyes are." Pa looked, and then he put down his fiddle and he began to play and sing. Laura and Mary forgot all about Mad Dog. Pa kept time with his foot, and Mary clapped her hands to the music when he sang, "All alone in the big woods and the snow." Pa, Ma, Mary, Laura, and baby Carrie were comfortable and happy, especially at night. Then the fire was shining on the hearth, and the cold and the dark and the wild beasts were all shut out, and Jack, the bulldog, and Black Susan, the cat, lay blinking in the flames of the fireplace. Ma sat in her rocking chair, sewing by the light of a lamp, and the lamp was bright and shiny, and there was salt in the bottom of its glass bowl, the kerosene to keep the kerosene from exploding, and there were bits of red flannel among the salt to make it pretty. It was pretty. Mary loved the look of the lamp, with its glass chimney so clean and sparkling, and its yellow flame burning so steadily, and its bowl of clear kerosene colored red by the bits of flannel. She loved to look at the fire in the fireplace, flickering and changing all the time, burning yellow and red, green, sometimes above the logs, hovering blue above the golden and ruby coals. And then Pa told stories. When Laura and Mary begged him for a story, he would take them on his knee and tickle their faces with his whiskers until they laughed, and his eyes were blue and merry. One night, Ma looked at Susan, stretched herself in front of the fire, running her claws out, in and out. She said, "Do you know that a panther is a cat, a great, big, wild cat?" "No," said Laura. "Well, it is," said Pa. "Just imagine Susan bigger than Jack and fiercer than Jack when he growls. Then she would be just like a panther." He settled Laura and Mary more comfortably on his knee, and he said, "I'll tell you about Grandpa and the panther." So here's the story of Grandpa and the panther. Your grandfather went to town one day and was late starting home. It was dark when he came riding his horse through the big woods, so dark that he could hardly see the horse, when he heard a panther scream, and he was frightened, for he had no gun. "How does a panther scream?" Laura asked. "Like a woman," said Pa, "like this." Then he screamed, so Laura and Mary shivered with terror. Ma jumped out of her chair and said, "Mercy, Charles." But Laura and Mary loved to be scared like that. The horse with Grandpa on him, ran fast, for it was frightened too, but it could not get away from the panther. The panther followed through the dark woods, and it was a hungry panther, and it came as fast as a horse could run. It screamed now on this side of the road, now on the other side of the road, and it was always close behind. Grandpa leaned forward in the saddle and urged the horse to run faster. The horse was running as fast as it could possibly run, and still the panther screamed close behind. Then Grandpa caught a glimpse of it as it leaped from treetop to treetop, almost overhead. It was a huge black panther leaping through the air like Susan leaping on a mouse. It was many, many times bigger than Susan, and it was so big that it leaped on Grandpa, that if it leaped on Grandpa, it could kill him with an enormous slashing claws and its large, sharp teeth. Grandpa on his horse was running away from it as a mouse runs from a cat. The panther did not scream anymore. Grandpa did not see it anymore, but he knew that it was coming, leaping after him in the dark woods behind him, and the horse ran with all of its might. At last, the horse ran up to Grandpa's house. Grandpa saw the panther springing. Grandpa jumped off the horse against the door. He burst through the door and slammed it behind him. The panther landed on the horse's back, just where Grandpa had been. The horse screamed terribly and ran. He was running away in the big woods with the panther riding on his back and ripping his back. Oh no! With his claws. But Grandpa grabbed his gun from the wall and got to the window just in time to shoot the panther. Grandpa said the panther, he would never again go out into the big woods without his gun. And here is a picture of the panther chasing Grandpa on his horse. When Pa told this story, Laura and Mary shivered and snuggled closer to them. They were safe and snug on his knees and his strong arms around them. They liked to be there before the warm fire with Susan purring by the hearth and good dog Jack stretched out beside her. When they heard the wolf howl, Jack's head lifted and the hair rose stiff along his back, but Laura and Mary listened to the lonely sound in the dark and the cold in the big woods, and they were not afraid. They were cozy and comfortable in their little house made of logs, with the snow drifted around and the wind crying because it could not get in by the fire. So that's the end of chapter 2. I hope you're enjoying this day and that you make a little time to read a book on your own and maybe do some Prodigy or Zern for 20 minutes. Have a good day.